What's up, YouTube? It's your boy GP's on the keys, and it's too easy. We're back with a video today. I did see that I had a history series that a lot of y'all really liked, and I reacted to the history channels, like the World War II animated videos like this. Y'all really like these, and I saw that they have posted more. So you know what I'm saying? Why not react to these? Grime reactions are coming shortly as well. But anyway, hey, let's get to it. World War II in Estonia, animated 1941.
In 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union had divided Eastern Europe into mutual spheres of influence. Estonia fell into the Soviet sphere, and by mid-1940 the country was occupied by the Red Army and annexed into the Soviet Union. By mid-1941, Germany was finishing preparations to attack the Soviet Union. The attack would be launched by three army groups. Army Group North would advance in the Baltic with the objective of capturing Leningrad. The attack was launched on the 22nd of June. The Germans caught the Red Army by surprise, and after defeats near the border, the Soviet forces began the retreat to form a new line behind the Daugava River. However, the Germans had already seized a bridgehead over it. The Germans continued their advance northwards. Now the Red Army attempted to create another defensive line using the fortifications on their 1939 border, the so-called Stalin Line, while their other units withdrew north into Estonia. Most of the German troops were to make an attempt to break the Stalin Line near Pskov, while a smaller force would follow the Soviet forces north into Estonia. Estonia housed important Soviet naval installations. The coastline was covered by an extensive network of coastal artillery batteries, while tens of thousands of soldiers guarded the coast against a potential amphibious assault. After the loss of the Soviet naval base of Liepaja, Tallinn became their only naval base near central.
Okay, I see what the strategy is. Like if we give up land, it's a loss, but it's okay because we can retreat, but we can fortify from a different angle before they. Okay, because I see this is like the biggest. This is a really big deal right here because this is like naval base. This is where the ships are. This is lots of where supplies come in from other countries. This is like another whole facet of your army, and you got to protect that.
Baltic. The main goal of the Germans in Estonia was the capture of Tallinn. Many Soviet policies were unpopular among wide swaths of Estonian population, and just a week before the war, the first mass deportation was carried through by the Soviet state security services. Many people had escaped to the forests to avoid being deported and began an armed struggle against the Soviet authorities. They would become known as the Forest Brothers. The Soviets formed about 20 volunteer destruction battalions from the local communists and their supporters to combat the insurrection and conduct scorched earth policies. The Germans assumed that the Red Army had abandoned Estonia and were unaware that it had taken defensive positions in the central part of the country. As a result, the Germans had allocated only 2 divisions for the capture of the country. One division would advance into western and the other into central Estonia. The division's main forces were preceded by their forward detachments. In central Estonia, the forward detachment advanced and captured the town of Viljandi. The Red Army was able to contain its advance and successfully retreat to the main line of resistance. The Red Army had abandoned the territory south of its defenses, which allowed the Forest Brothers to organize their forces. They took over control in southern Estonia and began skirmishing with the Red Army in the town of Tartu. In central Estonia, the main forces of the German division joined combat. They were able to push the Red Army back somewhat, but could not break through their defense. The Germans had better luck in the west, where the forward detachment outmaneuvered the Red Army, taking the town of Pärnu. They had outflanked the Soviet defense and proceeded north towards Tallinn with little opposition.
Jeez, they just ran right through you. Like y'all were prepared, and they only sent 2 divisions in there. That's the thing. I keep looking at here because I think here's the camera. This is the camera. Bro, they only sent like 2 divisions in there, and you had 20. It said 21 of them. You had 21 lined up, and you had like 2 German divisions coming here and punch through your wall of defense. Man.
The Red Army pulled the division off from coastal defense duty and used it to block the German advance at Märjamaa. The main force of the German division arrived. There was heavy fighting for several days. The Germans were unable to advance further. The advance of both German divisions had been stopped by the Red Army. The Germans realized that they needed a different strategy and more forces to conquer Estonia. They decided to create a point of main effort in central Estonia and concentrated both of their divisions there. They deployed 3 more divisions to Estonia. One would strengthen their forces in the center, another would cover the western, and the third the eastern flank. While the Germans were reorganizing their forces in Estonia, their troops further east were attempting to continue the advance towards Leningrad. By that time, the Red Army had recovered from their early defeats and the German forces had exhausted much of their original offensive power. The Germans were unable to make large gains. They decided that the situation had become too unfavorable to continue the offensive. They halted the operations for 2 weeks to restore their combat potential.
So you gotta think though, like the Red Army literally just, like the Russian army, they came up in there, they got to about halfway through Estonia and then coming up to Stalingrad and then they stopped it. Like they stopped it, they were coming with full force. But you gotta think, like he said earlier, that the Germans assumed that the Russians were not gonna protect Estonia. So when you only send 2 divisions in a country where they got 20 plus divisions, you do the math.
By that time, the Germans had finished deployment of their forces into central Estonia. The Red Army also concentrated its forces in the region to match them. They were able to create a continuous front and formed a reserve force. Its goal would be to seal off any German breakthroughs with counterattacks. As the Red Army expected the Germans to continue the attack towards Tallinn, their reserves were deployed in the northern direction. However, the first mission of the German forces was to cut off the Soviet forces in eastern Estonia and capture the airfield at Tartu. The Germans began the offensive on the 22nd of July. They managed to achieve surprise and broke through the Soviet lines.
And and I guarantee you, I put $5 on it that he's going to say the word encircle in the next 30 seconds to a minute. The word encircle is going to be used. Bro, I almost guarantee it at this point, because the way that they're going, it already looks like it's an encirclement.
At the same time, they launched spinning attacks north in order to keep the Red Army's units from moving east. The Soviet reserves were not in position to launch an immediate counterattack and began redeploying. The Germans were able to continue the advance. The Red Army delayed evacuation of the units in the south, and the Germans managed to reach the Lake Peipsi and cut them off. The Soviet forces were pushed into small pockets near the coast. Their troops attempted to break through the German positions, but only a small part of them was able to exfiltrate to their own lines. The Soviet reserves finally arrived to launch a counterattack. However, the Germans had had some days to reorganize their forces and prepare them to move north into a gap in the Red Army's lines. The Germans were able to start their attack before the Soviets. With little Red Army forces in their way, they advanced quickly into the rear of the counterattacking Soviet units.
I'm surprised he didn't use the word encircle, but like you see that right there, they encircled them near the island. Near the coastline.
At the same time, the German units in the south were able to hold back the Soviet counterattack. Other German forces joined the attack from the west, and the Red Army's counterattacking units found themselves encircled. With the two...
Hey, I'ma go. See, it was just later on. You see, I told you. I'ma go with this. I knew he was gonna say encircled. I knew it.
Two encirclements, the Red Army had lost its strongest forces in Estonia, and the balance of power had shifted decisively into Germany's favor. As a result, the Red Army could now do little to hamper German progress. The Soviet command decided to reinforce their forces in Estonia with 2 divisions, but it would take a while for them to arrive. The Germans now made it their goal to cut the Soviet forces in Estonia into 2. Soon they were able to sever the railway communication between Tallinn and Leningrad. The Germans now had to choose whether to proceed west and take Tallinn or go east. The main body of Army Group North was to start its offensive towards Leningrad, and it was chosen to support that attack and move east. The Germans reached the sea and fully cut forces but it did not have much success. The German advance continued. On the 8th of August, the Germans The German advance towards the sea had cut off Soviet forces in the Baltic, which numbered at least 75,000 men. The Germans and Finns laid several minefields in the Gulf of Finland to hamper traffic between the cut-off Soviet forces and Leningrad. The Soviet command decided not to concentrate all of their forces into a single formidable position, and instead it was decided to hold all of the areas they controlled. This allowed the Germans to destroy the positions one by one.
Once you weaken the forces, Germany is gonna come in and just clean all this area out. You know, territory. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you can't really fault whoever was commanding the Red Army at this time. You really couldn't, because it's like they couldn't do anything.
One of the reasons was the use of the airfields on Saaremaa by Soviet Air Force to bomb Berlin. The Soviets had fortified the island with many naval artillery batteries, but they were directed towards the open sea, and the eastern direction was left uncovered. The island of Vormsi was the least fortified, and the Germans captured it first. The islands of Saaremaa and Muhu had a garrison of 18,500 men, but the Soviets did not know where the Germans would land, and the defenders were dispersed along the coastline. The Soviets were unable to stop the German landings to the island of Muhu, and the Germans overran it in some days. From there, they moved on to Saaremaa. At the same time, they launched several diversionary attacks, which did not allow the Red Army to concentrate all of their forces against the main German offensive. The Germans pushed the Soviets into the western part of the island. The Soviets lacked enough naval transport to evacuate their forces, and they pulled them back to make a last stand on the Sõrve Peninsula, which was much more favorable for defense. Here the German advance slowed down significantly. They slowly pushed forward, and after 2 weeks of fighting, they reached the tip of the peninsula and captured the surviving Soviet.
Oh my God! They just walked them. They just walked them out the island, just slowly pushing back over the course of 2 weeks. Just. And then they go. That's crazy, bro.
Defenders. Witnessing the failure of defense of Saaremaa, the Soviets decided to evacuate the 5,000-strong garrison of the island of Hiiumaa. However, before most of the evacuation could be started, the Germans launched an amphibious assault on the island. They orchestrated several diversionary attacks which fractured the defenders' forces. They pushed the Soviets northwards and soon held the southern and eastern part of the island. The remaining Soviet forces retreated to the north to be evacuated, but they were unable to stop the German advance, and soon the Germans reached the northernmost point of the island. By that time, the Soviets were in control of Hanko naval base in Finland with a garrison of 23,000 soldiers, and the island of Osmosaar in Estonia with a garrison of 1,500 men. As winter approached, the freezing of the sea threatened to cut these bases completely off from naval supply, and the Soviet command decided to evacuate them.
Oh my God, this. Oh, you had people trapped on there, and the water was about to freeze, so nobody was going to be able to get to them. That's crazy. Imagine you stuck on an island hundreds of miles away from the coastline. And you can't go because the water is frozen.
In the beginning of December, the last Soviet soldiers left the bases for Leningrad, and with that, all of Estonia was in German hands. Meanwhile, the Germans had reached the approaches of Leningrad, but they lacked the strength to take the city. Instead, they attempted to cut off the last railroad that enabled to supply the city over the Lake Ladoga. The strength of the Red Army and the German forces had become equal, and the Soviets repelled the offensive and retook the railway. The supply of Leningrad was retained. During the next 2 years, most of the fighting took place in the southern and central parts of the front, and in the north, the Red Army did not advance much. However, by January of 1944, the balance of power was altered significantly to the Red Army's favor, and the Soviet forces prepared to undertake a massive attack on the northern part of the front. We'll talk about that in the next part.
Hey, but as you see, you see how Germany just ran up in there and just took Estonia and all the islands, just like, hey, we're gonna come in here and just steal all this land. You know, we don't. You know, I hope y'all don't mind. But yeah, I don't know. I like watching these because it's just like, I don't know. These animations are just like interesting. Like this stuff is just interesting. I don't know why I like watching it, but it's just like interesting. And I know that y'all responded very well when I dropped these types of videos. So we might be going back to the grime and the history type videos. Why not? You know what I'm saying? Definitely let me know if you want me to do an album reaction again, because I'm probably gonna drop that on my Daily Motion. I probably might react to Dave's last album. I think didn't Wiley drop an album recently, so I'll probably put that on my Daily Motion. Anyway, thank you again. Please hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Turn on that post notification bell, man. Turn that bell on, bro. Be notified every time I upload. But thank you. Please be safe. Have a great day. Stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.